Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 27th of July 2022. These are the stories that we'll be discussing in detail during the course of our show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the statement by our Foreign Ministry in response to the statement by the Indian External Affairs spokesperson as far as China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and, of course, Pakistan and China and the need to extend this China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is concerned. There was a very strong rebuttal on those remarks, and of course Pakistan's side has said that not only is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor a hallmark of the friendship and the relationship between Pakistan and China, but that also India needs to take care first of what it is doing in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This is going to be our first story. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the pressure as far as economy and, of course, the rupee versus dollar is concerned. As far as the latest estimates are concerned, from the State Bank, 237 rupees is the rate as far as rupee versus dollar is concerned. Where on one hand there is a steep climb of the dollar versus the rupee, on the other hand we've got Miftah Ismail Saab, our Minister for Finance, who says that the country is not going to default as increase of inflow of foreign currency is going to happen within the next few days. He has also said the pressure on rupee is going to vanish very soon. He also talked about different measures that the government is taking as far as the economy is concerned. This is going to be our second segment, ladies and gentlemen. Then we'll be talking about three Pakistani students, Ikra Fatima, Satish Kumar and Bhagchand Meghwar, who have been the winners of the 6th Huawei ICT competition 2021-2022. Competitors from all over the world took part, but these three from different backgrounds have clinched the top spots. Congratulations to all three of them, and we'll be talking about them in our third story. And lastly, we'll be talking about the 74th martyrdom anniversary of Captain Raja Muhammad Sarwar, the country's first recipient of the Nishan-e-Haider. That is the highest military honor. We still remember him and we still salute him for having stood by Pakistan and defended our boundaries. This is going to be the outlook of what we're going to talk about today. Let's begin with our first segment. Our first segment concerns China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Pakistan, China and India that is trying to cast negative aspersions as far as the CPEC and Pakistan and China are concerned. More in the following report.
India has a long history of hatching malicious conspiracies against Pakistan in order to advance its hegemonic designs in the region. As the stage is now set for expansion and geographical extension of CPEC to western Pakistan and to landlocked Afghanistan, India has launched baseless propaganda against CPEC. Reacting to the comments of the Indian Foreign Ministry spokesperson on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Islamabad said New Delhi's attempts to cast aspersions over the project shows India's insecurity. Foreign Office spokesperson Asim Iftikhar Ahmed said that Islamabad categorically rejects baseless and misguided remarks by his Indian counterpart that were made to politicize CPEC. The Indian government had never been shy from spreading disinformation against Pakistan, and a study conducted by EU Disinfo Lab, an information distribution group, provided undeniable evidence that India had been involved in a systematic disinformation campaign against Pakistan, China and CPEC. The multi-billion-dollar project CPEC will result in import substitution, export orientation and employment creation in a variety of sectors in Pakistan and provides an excellent opportunity to catalyze socio-economic development, connectivity and prosperity of the region. The peace of South Asia is hostage to Indian hegemonic designs inspired by BJP governments. Majoritarian politics and international community must hold India accountable for its hegemonic actions.
Former Ambassador Jamil Khan Saab joins us online. Sir, thank you very much to have joined us. When you look at China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, sir, of course, this is one of the hallmarks as far as the Pakistan-China relationship is concerned, and the time-tested, time-bound friendship and cooperation that both countries have been extended towards each other, especially from China's side. When you see countries such as India casting such aspersions, especially negative aspersions as far as CPEC or the future of CPEC is concerned, does that come as a surprise to you?
No, not at all, because India has done it earlier also. In fact, if you recall, India had also tried to take up this issue with Chinese, indicating that the CPEC, particularly the last segment of CPEC, which connects Kashmir province, Rugar area, that passes through the disputed territory. And China had also responded it in a very legal manner by quoting 1974 agreement with India, indicating that it is subject to the resolution of the Security Council, and whatever is the outcome on the referendum on the plebiscite, Chinese would accept it. So the matter should have been should have ended over there. But now I think there is another dimension to it, and that dimension is because of the new foreign policy of the United States. The Indians are trying to exploit the strength which they have got for some different reason, the containment of China. So they are trying to throw this logic around the world that the CPEC, any
So,
third
Ambassador Saab,
country,
if I
participating.
understand correctly, do you feel that these aspersions or this negativity or this propaganda that India is trying to propagate within the region and also beyond has the backing of certain important global actors?
If we view it in a bigger canvas, we'll probably be able to infer that the Indians now are being used and their entire geopolitical situation of India. And if we, while I'm describing that, I have at the back of my mind the string of alliance, which is India, Philippines, and Japan, Australia, and I also have at the back of my mind AUKUS, which is the recent phenomenon, which is a military agreement of these countries. And I have not ignored, while I'm describing this to you, this accord which they have already, another various accord which India and the US and some other powers have already Quad they have signed. So once we keep all these points at the back of our mind, we'll probably find that the Indians would like to re-energize it, and they are the Indians basically, if we prop the history, they are the one which who have impeded the growth and the development of the South Asian country. SARC is one example, and these are the impediments they are trying to just throw. And now they are making this issue. This BRI is a flagship. The CPEC is a flagship project. The flagship project.
Ambassador Saab, CPEC is a
BRI.
flagship project. We've discussed so many times in the past as well of the importance of this Belt and Road Initiative highlight project. But do you feel that because of the Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States of America, also the fact that we are seeing more openly how different quarters and blocks are being made as a result of the Russian-Ukraine war, that what India is doing as far as casting a negative light on the China-Pakistan economic corridor or on China-Pakistan relations or on the future of this very important project is just a manifestation of what the geostrategic strategy and of course the whole how should I say politics is evolving since the last few years.
So there are two angles to it. One, that India is exploiting it in terms of Jammu and Kashmir, occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and they are also giving an understanding to the United States and its allies, the bloc politics, what is now emerging in this region, in the overall landscape of the global geopolitical situation. India is on one hand trying to give an impression that they are ready for the containment of China, and that way they are able to please, or at least they are able to give the understanding to the interested parties, that is United States and its allies, that they can in that containment China would be. And how? You see, that containment is connected with the SCO now. That containment is connected with this bloc, what you have mentioned, the Russians, China, Iran, and the neighboring country, including Pakistan. So basically, if the containment is possible, what is happening around is the cost of China is reduced 5 times. The oil, 90% oil, 85-90% oil is transported through the Indian Ocean. And once the CPEC is constructed and built, the very containment policy of America, which they have announced it several times at the highest level, at the presidential level of the United States, that
Ambassador Saab, I'd
containment
like to
policy
understand
would also
something
be
else as well. You
implemented.
know, Ambassador Saab, we see a lot of changes happening. We've seen the Ukraine-Russia war. We've seen the JCPOA not attaining the positive results that were expected of it. We see Afghanistan and the situation that it is embroiled in. We see also Turkey and its relationship with the other countries. We also see the Central Asian countries. There is a huge change in the geostrategic arena as we speak, and this is a very speedy change that we are observing. If Iran had the amount of oil that it has, if China and Iran have forged stronger relations as they have, there is going to be again a change because of the oil and gas crises and the food crisis that has engulfed. The food crisis might come to some sort of an end, but the fuel crisis is still there. Do you feel also that there is a deliberate attempt to demean any project by China that could further strengthen it in the geostrategic arena?
Yeah, well, that fulfills the foreign policy of those who are trying to contain China, and because of which all these projects which China is trying to launch or trying to complete, the impediments would be created for China. And to what extent it would be possible, this transitional period, for example, Chinese would take several more years to complete BRI in its actual form, what they have planned, including CPEC, because CPEC is going to reduce the distance from 16,000 nautical miles to 5,000 kilometer only,
Of course.
reducing 5 times the distance also. So that automatically gives a huge strategic benefit to China, which, and because what is the vulnerability of China at this point in time? If the powers which are opposing, which are trying to contain China, if they are able to stop their supply line, which is through the Indian Ocean, and I would once again draw your attention and the viewers that they have recently done their AUKUS, and AUKUS is a military agreement, and where they have the even nuclear submarines there in the Indian Ocean. And
True.
Quad, although they say Quad is just a trade and the commerce relation, but that has embedded advantage to the military, embedded military advantage also. So if we view all those things, we can very conveniently make out that this transitional period where this bloc, Russia and China, they are weaponizing themselves in the space also. The United States
All
and
right.
its allies are quite worried that China, but that this transition period to the best of understanding of so many analysts, including myself, is going to take about another 6 to 10 years. So during this 6 to 10 years,
So they're
this
trying their maximum to
further
damage the China-Pakistan economic corridor and the progress of projects such as the CPEC in those 6 to 10 years. Which brings me now to what the Indian External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Aridham Bakshi said. He said that New Delhi opposes the bid by Beijing and Islamabad to include third countries in the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And then he said, as per Hindustan Times, that any such actions by any party directly infringe on India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Let's take the first part. Inclusion of third countries in the China-Pakistan economic corridor. We know that Afghanistan is one of the countries that will be included in that. The Central Asian countries are also to be included in that. Is India somehow destabilized by the inclusion of these countries?
Well, India is just trying to throw a spanner. If you see the interest of the India, and if you see the interest of the Indian people, India has about 130 billion of their trade with China. So, in fact, and if they have become a member of SCO, if they like, and if they wanted, they could really have a huge progress and could have brought the benefits to its population. But it appears that because of their attitude and because of their alignment with certain other powers, and because of the illusion that they would probably be instrumental, they'll probably help the containment of China. I guess they are trying to just make their last ditch effort, and that is this effort is basically they are not going to leave it here. what I can suspect that they are going to, take it to the level of United Nations also. And there again, there would be a lot of debates, although they would not succeed because of China and Russia being
Before we come to the United
far.
Nations, because you have highlighted something very interesting when you talk of the United Nations, but before we come to that, I'd like to also ask, how does it infringe on India's sovereignty and territorial integrity if any other countries are made part of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor?
No, it's a sovereign right of the country's bilateral. If we have done our bilateral agreement in terms of CPEC, which we have done with China, then China and Pakistan, with our the mutual consultation, which I'm sure is there in the agreement also, the China and Pakistan can include any other country or any other entity for that matter, any other huge multinational company for the accomplishment of it. So if we take a look at the BRI, there are about 130 countries, they have already signed their MOUs or agreement with the Chinese government. So once they could be included in that overall project of about $4 trillion, then in CPEC, what stops them? What is the case which India is trying to make is that the territory through which this last segment of the CPEC is passing, they have the claim on it. And they are not regarding the Security Council resolution on it. They are not regarding so many international instrument which is already available. So that means there has to be a countermeasure from our side and from Chinese side. Unless we do the countermeasure at the international arena, probably India would keep trying to propagate that. It doesn't really make any difference to the international community or even at the Security Council level because there are already about more than 7 or 8 Security Council resolutions on this subject. So they would not be able to. So far as the answer to your question is in just one line, this is the bilateral agreement between China and Pakistan, and we can include any entity or any other country with mutual consultation.
All right, so that stands clear as far as infringement, so-called infringement of territorial integrity or sovereignty of India is concerned. Which brings me to Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. You talked about the United Nations. Asif Iftikhar Saab, in his rebuttal to this statement by the Indian side, also said that on the one hand, India is saying, putting on statements that are completely baseless. On the other hand, when it comes to Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, they are moving ahead with flagrant violations of human rights and of the United Nations resolutions, for that matter, resolutions that are there in the United Nations since 1948. Do you feel there is some kind of hypocrisy or duplicity here?
Oh, definitely, because that is proven through the international instruments. And as I was quoting you certain Security Council resolution, including General Assembly Resolution 2649, which gives the right to the freedom fighters to seek help from any country or any entity. And the United Nations says that they should be helped, as a matter of fact, in the debate of the General Assembly. But besides that, there are 2-3 reports. One is the report by the United Nations, which is recently last year, which has indicated and which has covered all the atrocities which is being done in the Jammu Kashmir by Indians and by Indian security forces there. Not only that, but 2 report of the Human Rights Commission, which has been cited so many times, and those commission report has already demanded an investigation what's going on in Kashmir. So there are very strong reports available, and where in the world, first time in the world, there are about more than 5 million bullets, more than that, have been pellets have been fired on the people, unarmed people, and the people have been blinded. So all these things are covered in those in that report, Security Council General Secretary General report, which was published in 2021. And there is and the world should be, I think, their attention should be drawn that how those atrocities is being directed to the unarmed people of Kashmir, and how their majority is being converted into minority, and how the domicile is being issued, and how there is a flagrant violation of Geneva Convention 49, and how there is a flagrant violation of International Criminal Court Article 8, subclause 2. But all these things are being disregarded by the international community, and particularly the power who matter, because they have their own interest
When it
with
comes
India
to
and
powers
Pakistan.
that matter, Jamil Khan Saab, sorry to interrupt you, but one of the rebuttal, I mean, part of the rebuttal statements by Azim Iftikhar Saab also said that Indians talked about the Indian attempts to mislead the international community about the status of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir by hiding its atrocities against the Kashmiri people, and he said this is never going to succeed. But the way we see the West reacting to the atrocities, we see so many reports coming out, but no proper tangible action beyond the statements happening. Is this also deliberate? Is this also maybe some kind of a success by India of misleading the international community?
I would say it's because of the interest in this region, recent interest, and the foreign policy reset by the United States, that India has augmented its atrocities, and India could not have done that if the foreign policy, to my understanding and to my analysis, they could not have done that if they had not seen that reset of the foreign policy in this region by the United States and their interest, and there are about half a dozen agreement with India, the United States, which it has made the military agreement with them. So they are trying to hide behind that, and that's why they abrogated the provision of Constitution 370 and 35A, and they are still scot free, and they just implementing their plan of converting Kashmiris into minority. And my fear is that because of the domicile law, more than 1 million people have already been pushed into Kashmiri population, and they are just waiting. And they're also demarking and conducting the delimitation to bring the constituencies in such a manner that they are able to have the majority in that. And once that happens, perhaps they might as well get ready for the plebiscite. And that stage, I think the world should have an eye, and Pakistan should further augment its efforts to let the world realize, and particularly by citing those reports which we are discussing and which we have been discussing before also. Unless we do that, probably Kashmiris would find themselves in a very complex situation.
When you look at the dynamics of international politics, Ambassador Saab, and you see what is happening, just look at this region, what is happening in Afghanistan, in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and other countries of the region. Do you see a change happening because of the non-committal nature of the West towards highlighting or finding a solution to these issues?
No, I think that's why the friction and that's why the tension is increasing. And that's why the bloc politics is now enhancing and increasing the world landscape of the international politics. And that's why what I see that this bloc, the bloc with Russia and China, other countries included, they subsequently have to get stronger. The indicators, the budget allocation of China, if we see, China is hugely allocating its budget towards improving its military. They are going to have the competitive now, rather they are going to even take a lead with United States in terms of their warships are concerned. In next about 3 to 4 years' time, they've started doing it and they've already built it. Besides that, as I was indicating, that the space weaponization, the future, all the future conflicts would be dealt with and the war would be dealt with through the space weaponization. And they have already come at par with the United States, the Russians and the Chinese in the space. The recent space activities we have been monitoring, and we know how concerned the United States is about this bloc politics and about the strength which this bloc is gaining, not only militarily, but also economically. And you can see how Iran has started selling, how Russia has started selling its oil and the Iran, China, Russia, all how they are doing their trade and commerce, and there are more countries they are joining hands with them. So that is a matter of great concern to the United States, because if that
And of
happens,
course, a matter of great
then those
concern to
countries will
India
break
as well,
down.
and that is why these negative aspersions as far as China-Pakistan economic corridor is concerned. Thank you very much, Ambassador Jamil Khan Saab, to have joined us, to have talked to us about the CPEC, Pakistan-China relationship, and of course, as usual, India's negative perception of this mega project and trying to malign China, Pakistan, and these projects in the international arena. I'll end with the quote by Asim Iftikhar Saab when he, of course, released his statement in a rebuttal of what the Indian External Affairs Ministry spokesperson had said. He said, attempts to cast aspersions over the China-Pakistan economic corridor show India's insecurity as well as a pursuit of a hegemonic agenda that has held back socio-economic development in South Asia for decades. I hope the world is listening and understanding what the reality of these things are. Let's come to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the economic pressure vis-a-vis dollar versus rupee parity. As we know, 237 rupees is the worth of $1 as we speak today. That is the statement released by the State Bank of Pakistan. Mifta Ismail Saab says that this is going to come back to some kind of normality in the coming days and weeks. He also said that we are not going to go to any default like situation in the future or in the coming days. More in the following report.
Current spike in global inflation and market meltdown depicts economic consequences of Ukraine conflict, supply chain disruptions after pandemic, and illustrates urgency of dialogue and diplomacy. The external and internal challenges have economic impact upon Pakistan, and thus the rupee continued to slide against the dollar, hitting another low of rupees 237 in the interbank market. According to the Forex Association of Pakistan chairman Malik Bustan, the central bank should take strict measures against exporters who are not bringing back their proceeds to the country in due time. Finance Minister Mifta Ismail said that the country will not default as an increase in the inflow of foreign currency is expected in the next quarter. Mifta Ismail claimed that the inflows from the IMF will emerge within weeks because there was no chance of the fund reopening the loan negotiations. The IMF cut its global growth outlook for this year and next, warning that the world economy may soon be on the cusp of an outright recession. The Washington-based institute now expects the world economy to grow 3.2% this year, before slowing further to a 2.9% GDP rate in 2023. The risks to global and domestic economy are overwhelming and require pragmatic policy measures to avert economic meltdown.
Now, to discuss more of the economic outlook as far as Pakistan is concerned in the wake of the parity between the dollar and rupee, and of course the other issues that concern Pakistan's economy, we've been joined by Dr. Khaqan Najeeb. He's a senior economist. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Saab, the rupee is at 237 vis-a-vis the dollar. We have a lot of, question marks that emanate within the society as far as Pakistan's economic outlook is concerned. On the other hand, we've got Mifta Ismail Saab, who says not to worry, that in the coming days and weeks everything is going to stabilize and Pakistan is not going to go into a default. What's your take on the current economic outlook, sir, and how do you see this parity between dollar and rupee?
Rahim, it's always a pleasure to be on your show and especially on PTV World. So let me start by looking at the global picture. The global picture is one where growth is slowing across the globe. Inflation is on the rise. The oil prices are still hovering at about $105 a dollar per barrel in terms of Brent. So the global picture is not one of encouragement. Rather, it's a picture of being careful. The same trend is expected in 23. The global growth is expected to remain subdued. In this picture, we see Pakistan trying to not overcome the external circumstances, but also trying to manage the domestic circumstances. The energy bill for Pakistan has continued to rise. What you see currently is a risen energy bill. When we finished June, I was just looking at the numbers. The current account deficit numbers for the year FY 2022 have now ended at $17.4 billion, indeed a high number. And for June alone, they are $2.3 billion. A key reason for this is the oil imports of nearly $3 billion alone in June. In May, they were about $1.4 billion. So you can see that there is almost a doubling of the oil imports that happened. So currently, what you see happening in the economy is largely from the external side, which is occurring from the global markets and the global scenario that is developing. On the domestic side, of course, the uncertainties due to the IMF program.
All right, Dr.
Uncertainties.
Khaqan, let's come to the IMF program. Now, IMF has cut the global growth outlook for a large number of countries across the world, and it says it's because of surging inflation, severe slowdowns in countries even such as the United States of America and China, which has given rise to this downgrading of the outlook of the IMF as far as development or growth is concerned. Do you feel that Pakistan is also somehow a victim of this global trend?
So, of course, when there is a global slowdown, our exports are affected. But at the same time, with the rising prices, our imports go up. Last year, we clocked imports nearly $80 billion, which is indeed a high number, and clocking a trade deficit also nearly $48 billion is indeed a high number. And if there is a further slowdown in the global economy, our exports, which we intend to take to $35 billion this year, would get hurt. And we may not be able to make that number. But as far as we are concerned, our concern is more on the IMF program and Pakistan going back to the IMF program by completing the 7th and the 8th review. Right now, the uncertainties in the country, beyond the political uncertainties, are mainly the IMF program. Us getting back on the 7th and 8th review, we have completed the staff level agreement, but I also feel that most of the conditions for Pakistan in terms of the prior actions that are required to move back to the program are now completed with the electricity tariff raise that we did yesterday. So, considering all in all, I think what has happened is that the delay in the IMF, the Fitch downgrade, the external circumstances, the slow supply of dollars, the higher demand that has been created due to the imports has led to where we stand today.
All
Moving
right, Dr.
forward.
Saab, you in the very beginning of our conversation, you talked about the global supply chains. You talked, and I would like to add COVID-19 and the Ukraine war in all of this. Do you feel there are key concerns by the global economic giants, whether it be the IMF or other giants, that this could lead to a slower economic growth in the next fiscal year, and B, an effect on developing countries such as Pakistan, such as Bangladesh? We know that Bangladesh has also asked for a huge amount from IMF in order to take itself out from the current turmoil it is embroiled in. Also, India is facing a lot of economic brunt of the policies that it had undergone in the last few years. So do you feel that developing countries as such will be the first to bear the brunt because of the Ukraine war and the resultant, whether it be a global supply chain issue, whether it be fuel or gas issues related to this war, or because of COVID-19? Do you feel these two are very important issues and concerns that will remain so in the next couple of months?
So, Omar, that's a very good point. The emerging markets are the most hit because their buffers against a shock like this are lower than the buffers that are held by the developed countries. So, but the preemptive work that countries do will be most helpful. Now, if you look at Bangladesh, it had good reserves of over 3 months of cover that they gave to the imports, whereas Pakistan today stands at barely 1.5 months of cover. They preemptively have just asked for a small package of $4.5 billion, but the reason is to move to reforms that lower the impact, the exogenous shock that is coming through the global price hike because of the geopolitical situation, especially emanating from the Ukraine and the Russian situation, and the gas prices, because of which have gone up across the world. So they have preemptively moved. I have always maintained that people tend to think that IMF inflicts all these difficulties for Pakistan. Right now, where we stand, the quicker that we go to the IMF,
The
the
better it is for
less
us.
will be the pain that will be felt for us, the pain of a default, of a rescheduling of our debts would be much, much harsher than going to the IMF and doing, the necessary things like the electricity, the gas tariff, the petroleum subsidy concentration on the vulnerable, the, budget as presented in accordance with the agreement with the IMF. This would be much less hurtful. And we don't have the state bank reserves, barely at $9.3 billion to survive without building these reserves. And
All right.
building these reserves today is beyond the IMF, going to the friendly countries, going to the multilateral organizations. My submission has always been that we should have completed the seventh review 3 months ago, and Pakistan would have been in a different situation altogether.
Of course, because of political situations also and the political instability in our countries since the last few months, we have come to such a situation where we stand in. But of course, the government is trying its level best to take Pakistan out of this current crisis. And I'll refer to two statements by our Finance Minister, Miftah Ismail, and I'd like your point of view on it. Firstly, he said that the country will not default as an increase in the inflow of foreign currency is expected in the next quarter. Then he says that the pressure on the rupee is going to vanish in the next couple of weeks. He also said that sometimes surgery is not, people are not happy with surgical procedures, especially on the economy or on the situation. He was, of course, referring to the steps that had been taken by the government, but sometimes it's necessary. I'd like your point of view on these comments. Does the Pakistani public understand why the government had to take these measures?
So, let me reassure the country that Pakistan is now almost all complete on the prior actions to take us to the board around the 25th or 26th of August. And IMF as an anchor would ensure that there is no condition of any default that happens. So let's be assured of that. Number two, the pressure on the rupee right now has been primarily, besides the uncertainties, political and IMF, has been on the demand that has been created due to the import payments of the oil. They are likely to subside in coming weeks. And if they are to subside in the coming weeks, we have to ensure that our current account deficit comes down to, I would preferably like to see it, around $500 million on the average in the next year. If we are able to do so, and if we are able to make the gross financing needs of $33 to $35 billion possible with arranging the financing from across the board, multilaterals, commercial, bilaterals, IMF, and our friendly countries, then we should be comfortably on the path to stability and building our reserves from here, which would signal stability.
All right. Yes, Dr. Saab, there's a lot of concern within the public also because of this rupee dollar parity. And some of the economic experts, I'd like your point of view on that as well, say two things. First, that there's an import mafia that has practically drowned the national economy and still insists that more imports be allowed while the country is on the brink of default. This is what people are saying. I'm just quoting, unquoting. Secondly, that the official dollar rate is not the actual rate. A grey market has emerged and one can actually buy dollars at a higher rate from this grey market. Are these influencing this parity as well?
So the most that influences the rupee movement in a market-based exchange rate is the trade deficit of the country. When we are clocking high trade and current account deficit, the rupee gets under pressure because the supply is constrained. That's number one. And that's the time the exporters hold their receipts for a longer time so that they can benefit from a higher rupee rate come in subsequent days. And that's where this whole supply demand goes out of equilibrium. Here is the role of a state bank to ensure that the disorderly movement that is taking place in the market is to a large extent met and there is more orderly movement. There are two important points here. One, the state bank, as agreed with the IMF, can only intervene to a smaller extent than they would probably like. Two, the constraint of only $9.3 billion in the kitty also does not allow the state bank to intervene to the extent that they would want to. So the what you call the speculation rises because the speculators know that there is room for them to be able to do so. The third thing is that the remitters, our remittances also slow down as they also feel if we remit 10 days from today, maybe we'll get a higher rate. So, all of this adds to the circle of uncertainty.
Exactly, in this aura of uncertainty as far as Pakistan's economy or the rupee versus dollar parity is concerned. But let's hope that because of all the positive developments that have taken place, because of the timely intervention by the government and of course by Miftah Ismail Saab and his team, that we'll see good days by the end of August or mid of August, as you said, when the IMF board will of course convene, and we'll see the money coming in and the other friendly countries also pitching in money and stabilizing Pakistan's economy. Thank you very much, Dr. Khaqan Najeeb Saab, to have joined us, to have talked to us about this important point, that is the rupee dollar parity and the huge concerns that the normal Pakistani public has vis-a-vis that, because everybody thinks that Pakistan's economy is going in the doldrums. In fact, it is not. These are just concerns, and these concerns are going to be allayed, as Miftah Ismail Saab has said, in the coming days. Let's come to our last two stories very quickly. The first, on a positive note, three Pakistani students have won laurels in an international competition that was known as the Global Huawei competition. This was held in China. The three are Satish Kumar, Bhagchand Meghwar and Ikra Fatima. Mr. Kumar belongs to a remote village of Tharparkar. Mr. Meghwar hails from a village in Dadu district. Ms. Fatima belongs to Bahawalpur and has studied in Bahawalpur University. And both, through their sheer hard work and determination and passion, have earned themselves this laurels, which means to say that where there is a will, there's always a way. If you want to achieve something, you will always achieve that if you have the right determination and the zeal. And therefore, we congratulate all three of them for having achieved these laurels. And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, today is the 74th martyrdom anniversary of Captain Muhammad Sarwar Shaheed Nishan-e-Haider. His anniversary was also observed today in his native town village Sanghodi in Gujar Khan in Rawalpindi. He was the first recipient, ladies and gentlemen, of the Nishan-e-Haider, which is the country's highest honor. He was born in Singhodi village in Gujar Khan in 1910 on the 10th of November. He joined the army as a sepoy in 1929, served in the Baloch regiment till 1941, then commissioned in the Punjab regiment in 1944 and 48. While he was serving as a company commander in the 2nd Battalion of the Punjab regiment, he was assigned to an operation in Kashmir. He led his people there, and although he did not step back for a single moment, he achieved what he wanted to do, and he achieved martyrdom also because of his valiant efforts and that of his other members. And that is why he was awarded the first Nishan-e-Haider, the highest award that is given by any government, by Pakistan's government, and he was the first recipient of that. May his soul rest in eternal peace, and may he set an example for so many others to follow as far as defending our motherland is concerned. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow, same time, 7:05 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, is the new time for our show, Monday to Friday, and we'll be talking about national issues, international issues, social issues, issues that concern you, us, and Pakistan. And as I always end my show with, kindly follow the SOPs, get yourselves vaccinated if you haven't, and take extreme caution so that COVID-19 does not disseminate and dissipate as much as it should. And we need to curtail it, and only as one society and one nation can we do that. Allah Hafiz.